Hello Exile! So I'm kind of mad. Here I was farming a bunch of Strongboxes for a video to showcase just how the loot was, and GhzyTV goes and buffs the loot. Nice. So I did it all over again. Yep, I did 200 Strongboxes. Now with the added benefit of seeing what the loot looked like before. Oh my goodness, this is atrociously bad. And how it looks like after the recent changes. I put myself through this madness to see if it's worth investing your valuable Atlas passive points in, and if it actually is as profitable as it seems. Without further ado, let us begin. Strongboxes back in PoE 1 were not half bad. You could net a comfortable income running them, especially once the whole Atlas passive tree was added. Then they became even more viable. Fast forward to PoE 2, however, and things look a little different. The start of the Dawn of the Hunt update left Strongboxes feeling like absolute dog water, and after doing the first set of 100 in a row, they were not really something I would have invested my scarce passive points in, to be honest. Naturally, the loot was bad across the board, not just with Strongboxes, to the point where I felt like I was afraid to even invest exalts into rolling maps, or God forbid, use a regal orb early on to make a map rare. Because frankly, I always felt like I was always running at a loss with basic currency to actually do things with. However, with the recent changes to overall loot and raising loot tables in general, Strongboxes may actually have a fighting chance to be a viable strategy to include in your mapping. Maybe not as the sole strategy to earn currency, but it's worth considering combining it with another strategy to get the most out of it. It's simple, has a moderate cost, and requires very little time investment. Dawn of the Hunt also brought with it 4 unique Strongboxes that you can encounter. In over 200 Strongboxes, however, I only came across 2 of the 4. Rare doesn't even begin to describe them, and they aren't that rewarding except for the Venter's Gamba box. If you haven't yet come across this puppy, you can spend gold to open it up to 4 times, with the cost increasing each time. I've seen some people dropping stacks of 10 divines, and I'd wager it's even possible to roll mirrors from it. Yeah, like that's gonna happen in our lifetime. Going through the test though, I approached it not with an endgame highly juiced mindset, but from the view of someone who is playing a bit more casually, not juicing as hard, or just doesn't have that much currency to blow on some of the more lucrative strategies yet. That means I didn't spend a whole lot of currency on things like buying tablets, using only the ones that I farmed that rolled the modifiers I wanted, and using the currency that I either had on hand or farmed to fund the map and Strongbox rolling. Before we move on, let's go through the setup. Bear in mind that even though this is far from a highly optimized strategy, it's super simple to introduce. So let's start with the Atlas passives. First things first, we want to grab this Strongbox cluster over here. We don't have a whole lot of choice here to maximize our chances to get as many as we can in a map, so we take what we can get. Passing through all the increased pack size nodes to take Shrine Chance, for that little extra spice. On the way to the likely ambush node, which will give us a hefty 100% increased chance to find Strongboxes. High value thefts will, in theory, lessen the toll on our currency when we need to roll the Strongboxes. It's not always the case, but it helps a little bit. It also gives us a little boost to finding unique Strongboxes, not that it really makes that much of a difference. Ideally, of the new unique Strongboxes, we only want the Venter's Gamba box. I've only ever found this once before, so it's safe to say its spawn chance is ridiculously low. Next, we take the rest of the small Strongbox chance nodes and the 2 Strongbox and Shrine chance ones before taking Faith in Luck. This node is actually pretty OP because the chance to reopen Strongboxes triggered enough times to be of significance. It also works on unique Strongboxes if your luck is good. After taking Hidden Horrors for more monster density and Strongboxes, we finally take the Strongbox type selector. Here we have 3 choices that will skew how often we will encounter each box respectively. We have Ornate, Cartographer, which isn't worth it in my opinion at all, and Researchers. I went with the Researcher Strongbox because by my logic, that would have achieved the highest chance to drop currency and hopefully stumble across the unique Gamba box, which is based off of a Researcher Strongbox. For the rest of the tree, you can spec into whichever one your heart desires. Initially, when I first started this test, I specced fully into Wisps, as I know many people did. In the first 100 boxes, until around Strongbox 56 or so, I realized Wisps were utter dog. So once I had some currency under my belt, I then switched over to Precursor tablet juicing along with some Rogue Exiles thrown into the mix. In the top cluster, you take all the nodes for Precursor effects as well as local knowledge for a slight currency boost. I don't think it makes that much of a difference anyway, but one can dream. I finished off the top sector by pathing into some of the Rogue Exile nodes and then going over to Unstable Energies, and then finally onto some of the Explicit Modifier nodes combined with Grueling Journey. Bear in mind that you don't have to use my exact strategy. You can pair this with whatever you would like to focus on or what you find the most fun. If you would like to copy this, I will leave an image for you, so feel free to pause the video to copy my homework. Okay, that about wraps up the Atlas passives. Let's move on to the precursor tablets. I only rolled a handful of them with a chance to contain strongboxes, so my max strongbox chance was around 750% or so when the right passives procced, and I had enough towers overlapping for increased effect. The rest of the tablet modifiers I chose to run were mainly ritual because I wanted to finish off some of the passive points and map bosses, but again, you can run whatever you find fun. While we're on the topic of strongbox drop chance, I began to realize that having a high amount of chance to find strongboxes does not always equal more strongboxes per map. My goal originally was to complete 100, now 200 strongboxes, so naturally the more I encountered each map, the quicker the entire test will be. With all the nodes on the passive tree, we have a 340% base chance to encounter strongboxes, which is then further amplified by precursor tablets and other Atlas passives in the right conditions. However, in more than a few cases, I had just over 750% chance to encounter strongboxes, and I only found one per map. Now, I know GhzyTV did say that some maps had their base strongbox chance adjusted and will naturally have more than other maps. Even so, I ran some maps with 360% odd strongbox chance and I had more than 2 strongboxes. So it appears the percentage chance to encounter them does not automatically guarantee that you will come across them. It's more indicative of potentially finding them. However, as a general benchmark, I found that throughout the test, it seems to add an additional strongbox roughly every 200% higher you go. 200 to 399% will generally yield 1 strongbox. Perhaps more, but it's mostly 1. 400 to 599 is generally 2 or so. 600% up is 3. You get the idea. With the strategy out the way, I had a few simple parameters set for this test, still keeping in mind that we are treating this as if we are trying to spend as little as possible. Firstly, all my strongboxes had at least 4 modifiers on them and were at least rare. I mostly use regals and exalts to roll them. In some cases, I went beyond 4 modifiers, but the moment the strongboxes rolled the ones I was looking for, I stopped rolling further to save currency. As far as which modifiers we are looking for, the only ones that really matter are increased rarity and quantity of items found inside the strongbox. These two are the highest priority ones in my opinion. Rarity and quant aside, the secondary ones we can aim for are plus to chest level and I guess extra pack size. Aside from that, it's all up to RNG, baby. As far as we know and I know, rarity on our gear does not affect strongboxes directly, but it will affect other content that you come across in your maps. So, if you're targeting strongboxes specifically, rarity isn't required. I think for this test, I had around 40% rarity on my gear for the first 100 and then bumped it up to roughly 80% in the second set of 100. GhzyTV did say that they adjusted rarity, so now it has diminishing returns sooner, but that's still up in the air as far as I can see. All loot that I gathered in the maps was separated to show the income from just the strongboxes themselves and then other content like breach and ritual. I also recorded how many times I encountered each strongbox in each segment of the test. In these spreadsheets, there are some cases where faith and luck procced and I got to open up the strongbox again, so I counted it as an additional strongbox. This is the spreadsheet of the test before the 0.2G patch. In here, I had specced fully into wisps, as you can see, with only 6 rogue exiles gracing us with their presence. In the first 100, I came across one Ixchel's Torment unique strongbox, which is the one that spawns 30 packs of monsters or so. This was reopened in the same map because Faith and Luck procced, so I really only came across one, and it was absolutely not rewarding other than a bit of experience. We managed to complete this first test in 58 maps, and this is the spreadsheet after the buff to loot. I finished this in 49 maps, and yes, I found eventers in the second set of the strongbox test, but we will go through all of that in a bit. What's important here is that even though I had pathed into increased chance to come across rogue exiles, I still only encountered 6. Go figure. I've never really been too good at probabilities, so if any of you want to do the math and calculate the chance to encounter each strongbox, you are most welcome. Alrighty, It is time, exiles, for the loot section. Luckily, we now have a comparison of what it was like before and after. In the first set of the test, as in prior to the patch, I got way less currency than now. The true value of this strategy will mostly lie in the items you drop from the boxes. You will drop some currency, but unless you get a Ventus Gamba box often, selling the gear will be your best bet. We will go through all of this in a fairly rapid fashion, only focusing on items that I picked out that would be worth something. But before we talk about what we made, let's talk about costs. Everything in PoE has a cost, and Strongboxes are no different. On average, I would spend a combination of 1 Regal and about 2 to 3 Exalts per Strongbox, depending on if it was already rare when I came across it. Reopen the Strongbox when Faith and Luck triggered, etc. Because the loot was absolute trash when I started doing the whole test, I found myself in a constant deficit of currency, so I had to use the Exalts and Regals that I dropped during the runs. I tallied up the Exalts I had to take, which worked out to roughly 217 Exalts spent on Strongboxes and map rolling. Regals wise, I spent 78 and some change, but this was for both tests. In the first test, I picked up absolutely everything off of the ground because there was such little loot that I could do it with minimal portaling in and out. Oh my gosh, this is so bad. After the patch, however, there was so much bloody loot that my time in each map increased significantly. I had to make the decision to only pick up items that were tiered or generally valuable according to my loot filter, which isn't a bad problem to have. Finally, I will tally up everything from both tests at the end so we can compare. So let's begin with the loot from before patch 0.2G. Starting off with the map loot. Currency wise, there isn't really much to write home about here. In fact, I do not have any raw Exalts or even Regals to show for the first 100 Strongboxes, because I was too busy using them to actually do the test. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here anytime soon. Aside from the general drops we have here, notable currency drops I should mention are the 11 Chaos Orbs I had at the time, which I sold for about 5.5 Exalts each for 61 Exalts total. These were used to fund the test. If we still had the Exalts and Regals, I would have had 65 Exalts and 55 Regals. So at face value, if we convert the worthwhile currency and random exchangeable loot that we have left over from the maps, we're looking at 1 Orb of Annulment, which sold for 26 Exalts, 1 Lonely Greater Essence of Enhancement for 17 Exalts, 2 Omens of Corruption sold for roughly 8 Exalts each for 17 Exalts profit, and then finally an Omen of Amelioration for a tiny profit of 4 Exalts. Alrighty, now that we are past that disappointment, let's move on to where I believe and hope the real value lies in the strategy. The gear itself. Because this is heavily RNG dependent and also time consuming due to things not selling as quickly as exchanging currency on the exchange, your income will probably look vastly different to mine. In both tests, I will showcase some of the more valuable items that stood out to me, but we won't do a very deep dive. Otherwise, we will be here for a while. We do have 200 Strongboxes and about 100 maps worth of loot to go through after all. Like I said before, I made sure to pick up every item that I thought would be of value. This also means that I had to do some sorting at the end of the first 100, even with how bad the loot was. So from all of this, we're left with this. I know, it looks bad, but there are a few hidden gems lying in here. Before we get to the rare gear, let's go through some of the uniques that we dropped. I dropped 2 Beacons of Aziz. This one will sell for around 1 to 2 Divines. I'll probably put it up for 2 and reduce it to 1 after a day or so. The other one will net us 5 Chaos Orbs. A Coward's Legacy belt that I will put up for 20 Exalts. It's to be confirmed because these prices are all over the place to accurately decide. Kitoko's Current for 5 Exalts, and then a good old pair of Loctonials for 5 Exalts as well. Let's not forget the Tangle Tongue I dropped, which should get us about 4 Chaos Orbs. While I was doing the tests, I quickly zipped out to do a Trial Master to finish my Ascendancy points. After my very first kill, I dropped this shield, which after corrupting, wound up like this. Sure, this thing isn't as good as it was before Dawn of the Hunt, but I'm still rather proud of my luck on this one. It's not technically part of the loot in this test though, so I won't include it in the final tally. Alrighty, on to some of the more notable rares and magic gear that we gathered during the maps in the first test. This tiara, which apparently costs 10 divines, although I do think that's a tad out of proportion. I will try 2 divines and see where it goes. The scepter for about 3 to 4 divines, this other scepter for about 1 div, this focus for 1 div, and then finally this amethyst ring for about 2 divines. Like I said, I won't go through the gear in depth to avoid boredom, but I calculated that this cluster here will sell for a conservative 13 divines and some change. That is, of course, assuming everything will sell at that price, which it probably won't. Now the map loot is out the way, it's finally time for the first set of Strongbox loot. Are you ready for the most incredible amount of money you have ever seen? Exiles, I present to you the loot from the first 100 Strongboxes. Even worse, isn't it? This was from the before time, when loot was real bad. Let's go through the currency we got from the Strongboxes. Even though I was using currency from the loot that we picked up, tried my best to leave the Strongbox currency alone. I think the most that I took out of here was a few regals. Bear in mind that I ran into 27 researcher Strongboxes along the way, and this was the result in the end. 1 Orb of Annulment that sold for 30 exalts at the time, 25 exalts. I won't even bother selling the Greater Jeweler's Orbs now because they're worth almost nothing at the moment. 1 Orb of Chance sold for 5 exalts at the time. 4 Chaos Orbs sold for roughly 12.5 exalts each for a total of 50 exalts. And 16 Regals. After exchanging all the worthwhile currency and factoring in the exalts we picked up, the total raw currency income that we got from the first 100 Strongboxes amounts to just 110 exalts. Not even half a divine. With our meager raw currency income out of the way, let's move on to the gear that we dropped from the first set of Strongboxes. After sifting through all the crap loot, we are left with these. So let's start with the rare items. It's kind of sad that these are the best I could find after 100 Strongboxes, but it is what it is. This wand, which I'll put up for a divine and see where it goes. The other wand, which will probably sell for around 80 exalts or so because we are missing a key ingredient, i.e. plus level to spells. And then finally, this body armor for maybe 30 exalts. The best rare I found was probably this Bloodstone Amulet, which I say will go up for about 3 div and then we will take it from there. Stick with me, Exile, we are almost there. In terms of uniques, we have this Mega Nords for about 30 exalts. I also dropped this Nagahamu's Ngamahu. Fuck it, this charm. Back then it was worth a handful of exalts at the most. Now its price has risen to roughly 100 exalts, so it's not too bad of a score. And that's about it. The rest are some magic gear that I kept aside to craft on later and aren't worth too much by themselves. Oh, you thought we were done with the shitty loot here. Now we move on to the second set of 100 Strongboxes. I'll go through these in a similar rapid fire fashion to avoid taking too much time. Alrighty, let's begin with the map loot. As you can see, the loot is looking way better already, and this was after sorting everything out. After exchanging all the worthwhile currency, we are left with 177 exalts and 1 raw divine drop, which I never even saw in the first test. In terms of uniques, the only one that I thought was worth mentioning is the foiled corpse wades that I got for my first ever reliquary key, which I'll be keeping for the memes. The rest won't sell for more than 5 exalts except for the Splinter Heart, which I'm not too sure exactly what's going on here with the prices, but I will see. Moving on to the rares. We have this helmet for roughly 10 exalts, not much, but it's still something. This focus for about a divine, this helmet for about 2 divines, and then the scepter, which apparently goes for a minimum of 10 div with these mods, so I'd rather say a conservative 2 divines for a quick sell. Next up are these greaves, which I think may sell for about 60 exalts, and then finally this jewel, which I am sure will sell for about a div. This jewelry cluster is mostly magic bases that I picked up that I will slam later on when I'm in the mood to craft a bit. Honestly, the gear is way better now than it was when I was doing the first 100, but you knew that already, you cheeky noodle. So let's move on to the loot from the second set of Strongboxes, starting with the currency. For the second test, I put all the currency into its own tab for easy viewing, and this is after I took out exalts to fund things, etc. 1 Orb of Annulment yet again, which sold for 29 exalts profit, not too bad. 12 Orbs of Chaos for roughly 12.75 each, sold for 154 exalts profit. And finally, 1 Perfect Jeweler's Orb for 81 exalts profit. There's a much better currency income in this round considering I encountered roughly the same amount of researcher Strongboxes in the last 100. Alrighty, it's time for the Strongbox gear loot. Let's begin with the rares. Out of this cluster, these ones stood out to me. These gloves for about 1 div. These gold gloves will start off at about 2 div. This helmet for about a divine. These real sexy Var gloves for about 2 div, I'd say. Then we have this body armor for 2 div. Next up is this wand for about 2 div as well. It's just missing some raw spell damage here and it could be worth way more. Last but not least is this jewel that I dropped and then slammed with an exalt to get crit chance. I could probably sell it for about 4 divines for a quick sell. Uniques wise, there isn't anything really worth mentioning, all except for one. Probably the best Venter's Gamble that I have ever dropped in all the thousands of hours that I have played PoE. And this absolute specimen came from the only Venter's Gamble box I came across in 200 Strongboxes. It's worth a minimum of 10 divines, so I'm really happy with that. In fact, I think that the most profitable of the unique Strongboxes, at least of the ones I've encountered, is the Venter's Contraption. Sure, it's all RNG dependent, but that one box also gave me a perfect Jeweler's Orb and this Venter's Gamble. However, it is so rare that I wouldn't count on coming across it, but if you do, good luck. So those are some of the gear pieces that stood out to me, but if I had to estimate, the worthwhile gear in the second test will sell for a conservative 17 divines. 27 divines if we factor in the Venter's Gamble. Now that that's over, it's finally time to tally up everything and see the results. Thank you so much, Exiles, for sticking with me this far. We are almost at the end. Let's start with the first 100. So if we are looking at just the raw currency income from the map loot, we are looking at 64 exalts. This value is calculated after we took exalts to fund the tests though. Because a large portion of the value of this test is heavily RNG reliant and relies on good gear dropping, I will tentatively include the income from the gear as if they have already been sold. Plot twist, they haven't, but assuming all the gear from a map loot sells for a conservative 10 divines, that would take our map income to a grand total of 2,544 exalts or 10.25 divines based on the market at the time of recording. Now for the whole point of the test, the total from the first 100. If we combine all the worthwhile currency exchanges, worthwhile rares, and uniques from the first set, we will be left with a grand total of 1,094 exalts or 4.4 divines for our time. Adding both up, we are looking at around 3,638 exalts or 14.6 divines in profit, based on the current market at the time of recording. Moving on to the second set of 100, starting once again with the map loot. The total currency income amounts to a total of 425 exalts if we factor in the one divine that we dropped, which works out to 1.7 divines in total. Once again, assuming the gear sells for roughly 6 divines, that would leave us with a grand total of 1,983 exalts or just shy of 8 divines. And when I say just shy, I mean like 7.99. And finally, the projected totals from the final 100 Strongboxes. Currency-wise, we are looking at 516 exalts or 2.08 divines. If all of the gear that I aim to sell actually sells, for even a conservative 17 divines, that would bring us to a total of 19.08 divines or 4,731 exalts. If we had to include the Venter's Gamble, which I will put up for 8 divines, it would push that total up to a nice princely sum of 27.08 divines or 6,715.84 exalts profit. However, the Venter's Gamble is unrealistic, so I'm just putting it here for reference. I calculated that my average time per map was around 15 minutes or so, but that was heavily dependent on how much time I spent doing content like rituals, expeditions, and more. In many cases, especially in the final 100, it could go up to 20 minutes, but that was because my build, which is an ED Contagion Lich, isn't exactly the fastest build around. As with all of these tests, your income will most likely differ to mine as it is heavily RNG reliant. You could get the short end of the stick and not get anything worthwhile, or you can make some serious bank. If you had asked me if this was worth it before they made changes to loot, I would have straight up told you no. Or at least not as your main way of making currency. It's better used as a supplement with other strategies, which most of us do anyway. After doing 200 Strongboxes in a row, I can confidently say that after the 0.2G changes, they are definitely worthwhile if your luck is good, but then again, the same principle applies to pretty much everything in this game. I love the concept of the unique Strongboxes they brought in, but I do think they are a little too rare considering I did over 100 maps and only came across 3. As a strategy that requires not much investment or time spent doing the actual content, I'd say it's worth a go. Besides, the Strongbox monsters also drop loot, and in some cases they spawn a lot of packs, so it's a nice addition to flesh out map runs. Thank you so much for watching this far. I know this video was a bit longer than my previous ones and I tried my best to shorten it, but when you're dealing with as much loot as I was, it's tough. This video also took me a long while to make because I had to repeat the test twice, so if you enjoyed the video, please consider dropping a like and subscribing. It really helps the channel in more ways than you think. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some wisps to catch. Until next time, stay sane, Exile.